Okay, who brought the dog?
Ghostbusters wasn't just another comedy. It was a supernatural gamble that nearly drowned in its own slime. Behind the proton packs and punchlines lay chaos in every frame. The Marshmallow Man almost sank the movie. Ecto 1 barely rolled. Huey Lewis dragged the theme song to court. From Dan Aykroyd's cosmic vision to Bill Murray's contract rebellion, here are 20 wild facts about the film that conquered the world. Dan Aykroyd's first Ghostbusters draft didn't open in New York, it opened in the cosmos. His script imagined ghost hunters as interdimensional warriors strapping on helmets, blasting proton packs through wormholes, and chasing spirits across space and time. Entire planets were haunted, entire universes needed saving. But in 1982, Hollywood lacked the technology and budget. Aykroyd's vision would have cost hundreds of millions. A number so impossible the project nearly died. Enter Harold Ramis and Ivan Reitman, who scaled the madness down to something grounded. One team, one city, one haunting transformed abandoned galaxies into scrappy New York comedy gold. Dan Aykroyd never imagined Ghostbusters without John Belushi. He pictured his Blues Brothers partner as the ultimate wild ghost chaser, messy, unpredictable, hilarious. But in March 1982, before the script came alive, Belushi died of an overdose at just 33. Aykroyd was shattered. When the effects team designed Slimer, Aykroyd asked them to channel Belushi's spirit. They gave the green ghoul a gluttonous appetite, sloppy grin, and unstoppable energy. On set, Aykroyd called him the Belushi Ghost. Slimer wasn't just comic relief, he was a haunting tribute to the friend who should have been there, immortalized as cinema's hungriest ghost. When Dan Aykroyd first wrote Winston Zeddemore, he wasn't a sidekick. He was a decorated Air Force demolition expert with pages of backstory, meant to stand shoulder to shoulder with Venkman, Ray, and Egon. The role was tailored for Eddie Murphy, whose rising star power could have made Winston a fan favorite. But Murphy chose Beverly Hills Cop instead. The script was quickly rewritten. Winston's elaborate introduction was cut, his lines reduced, his arrival pushed to halfway through the film. Ernie Hudson, thinking he'd landed the role of a lifetime, was stunned to find his part gutted. What could have been 4 equals became 3 stars and 1 underused Ghostbuster. When Sigourney Weaver auditioned for Dana Barrett, she didn't just read the script, she transformed. Crawling across the floor, snarling and contorting her body, she mimicked one of Gozer's terror dogs. She stunned the room. Ivan Reitman watched, startled and slightly frightened. Weaver wasn't just acting, she was possessed. Fresh off Alien, she brought both strength and vulnerability, able to play romantic foil to Bill Murray while holding her own against demons and chaos. One terrifying audition turned her from contender to perfect fit. Bold, weird, and exactly what the film needed. The human heart inside a world overrun with supernatural terror and comedy gold. Bill Murray never signed on the dotted line. Columbia wanted a contract. Murray shrugged it off. Instead, he gave a verbal promise. He'd do Ghostbusters if the studio funded his passion project, The Razor's Edge. Then he vanished to France. Weeks before filming, no one knew if he'd show. Even Reitman sweated through sleepless nights. The studio braced for collapse. Then on day 1 of production, Murray walked in like he'd always been part of the plan. No contract, no guarantees, just a grin and endless improvisation. The studio gambled everything on a handshake, and Murray delivered one of comedy's most iconic performances without ever signing his name. In 1983, Columbia Pictures agreed to bankroll Ghostbusters, but just as production ramped up, Columbia was bought by Coca-Cola. The soda giant couldn't believe they were inheriting a $30 million gamble about ghost hunters in New York. Executives demanded meetings. Some wanted the plug pulled. For weeks, the film hung by a thread. Ivan Reitman and Dan Aykroyd fought back, insisting it could be a hit. Had Coke won, Ghostbusters might have died in development. Instead, the project limped forward, not because the studio believed in it, but because Reitman refused to let it go. Ironically, Coke almost cancelled one of the 80s most profitable pop culture machines. The Stay Puft Marshmallow Man wasn't CGI. He was a stuntman in a $20,000 foam suit, tromping through miniature New York sets built like dollhouses. Each building had to be wired with pyrotechnics, crumble on cue, and be destroyed in one take because once it fell, there was no resetting. Ivan Reitman was terrified. A giant marshmallow mascot stomping through Manhattan could turn the movie into a joke. At the first test screening, he sat frozen, waiting for laughs in all the wrong places. Instead, the audience erupted in cheers for the sweet absurdity that became the film's crown jewel. Filming at 55 Central Park West turned Manhattan upside down. Streets clogged, traffic stretched to Columbus Circle, and furious New Yorkers leaned on their horns. One angry bystander stormed onto the set to complain. Sci-fi legend Isaac Asimov. He hated that his neighborhood was gridlocked for a ghost comedy. Dan Aykroyd, a lifelong fan, raced over and soothed him the only way he could by gushing about Asimov's books until the author cracked a smile. The chaos of New York became part of the film's soul. Ghosts weren't chasing people in a quiet backlot. They were shutting down real streets with the city's pulse beating right through every frame. The very first scare, the ghost that explodes from the New York Public Library, almost didn't make it into the movie. Studio executives argued it was too scary for a comedy, worried families would walk out before the laughs even started. Without it, the ghosts would just feel silly. The gamble paid off. That librarian's sudden transformation sent audiences screaming, then laughing in relief as the Ghostbusters bolted for their lives. In one scene, the movie proved its formula, horror and comedy colliding in a single breath that defined the entire franchise. Columbia nearly couldn't use the name Ghostbusters. The title was already owned by Filmation, the company behind a goofy 70s kids show with a gorilla sidekick. Lawsuits loomed and Columbia scrambled for alternatives. For weeks, production materials bore placeholders like Ghost Smashers and Ghost Breakers. The actors filmed entire scenes shouting the wrong name, unsure what would stick. Bill Murray cracked jokes about it, but Ivan Reitman was panicked. You can't build a blockbuster if your title sounds like a cheap Saturday morning cartoon. Finally, Columbia struck a last-minute deal, paying Filmation to secure the rights. The irony came later when the animated spin-off launched as The Real Ghostbusters. The Ghostbusters ride was almost a disaster. Dan Aykroyd pictured a black ambulance hearse hybrid bristling with purple lights, sirens, and wild gadgets, less ghost hunting machine, more carnival float. It was flashy, bizarre, so the crew scrapped the circus car and dug up a battered 1959 Cadillac Miller Meteor ambulance. They painted it white, slapped on ladders, wiring, and that roof rack packed with mysterious tech. Suddenly, it wasn't ridiculous, it was iconic, a mix of junkyard salvage and sci-fi wonder. But the car had its own ghost. Peter Venkman's sarcasm wasn't in the script, it was Bill Murray. Almost every line he spoke was improvised. He cracked jokes, rewrote scenes on the fly, and never delivered the same line twice. For Ivan Reitman, editing became chaos. How do you cut a movie when the lead refuses to stick to a script? But Murray's unpredictability was lightning in a bottle. It turned Venkman into the dry, smirking heart of the film. What could have been a mess became legend. Fans still quote lines Murray invented on the spot, proof that sometimes the funniest dialogue comes from chaos, not planning. Murray's improvisation transformed scripted comedy into spontaneous gold. Ray and Winston once had their own side adventure set in Fort Detmering, a haunted military outpost. In the script, Ray encountered a female ghost who literally unbuckled his belt. The full sequence was filmed, costumes, sets, everything. But when editors trimmed the story, the subplot disappeared. What remained was just a single shot slipped into the film's montage. Ray lying in bed, eyes rolling back in bliss as a ghost hovers above him. Without context, the moment baffled audiences for decades. Was it a dream? A gag? A ghostly one-night stand? The truth is stranger. It was the leftover scrap of a deleted storyline. A spectral romance collapsed into one of comedy's weirdest fragments. The rooftop battle with Gozer wasn't always the finale. In early drafts, the Ghostbusters didn't win so easily. They were sucked into the spirit world, battling armies of ghosts in a nightmarish dimension. Ivan Reitman pulled it back. He wanted something tighter, funnier, and grander, the team facing off against a godlike villain above New York. The Ghost Army became a single showdown. The spirit world became the Manhattan skyline. By simplifying, Reitman turned an overstuffed ending into an iconic climax. Instead of faceless ghosts, we got the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, a finale equal parts absurd and epic. The Ghostbusters theme was as famous as the film itself, and just as controversial. When Ivan Reitman was editing, he temp-tracked scenes with Huey Lewis's chart-topper, "I Want a New Drug." The groove was perfect. Reitman even asked Lewis to write the official theme. Lewis declined. The job went to Ray Parker Jr., who had only days to deliver. Working against the clock, Parker created "Who You Gonna Call?", a chorus so sticky it rewired pop culture overnight. The song shot to #1. But its similarity to Lewis's hit was undeniable. Lewis's publishers sued, claiming Parker had lifted the riff. The case settled quietly, but the irony lingered. Lawsuit bait became iconic anthem. Harold Ramis didn't pluck Egon Spengler out of thin air. He built him from scraps of memory and chance encounters. Egon came from a Hungarian exchange student Ramis remembered from childhood, a name so unusual it felt instantly scientific. Spengler was lifted from Oswald Spengler, the German philosopher who wrote The Decline of the West, giving the character a cerebral, brooding edge. Even Egon's look wasn't invented in Hollywood. Ramis admitted he copied it straight from a man he once saw in an architectural journal, the tall frame, slicked back hair, severe glasses. The result was unforgettable, a character who looked like he'd stepped out of a lab carrying history's weight. By 1983, Industrial Light and Magic was booked solid with Return of the Jedi and Indiana Jones. That left Ghostbusters with nowhere to turn for its dozens of ghost effects. Columbia and MGM funded the gamble, and Boss Film Studios was born. Working around the clock, Edlund's team built terror dogs, proton beams, and infamous slime, all under crushing deadlines. The experiment paid off. Boss Film not only pulled off Ghostbusters, it went on to define effects for Die Hard, Big Trouble in Little China, and Batman Returns. One risky ghost comedy changed the industry. The Ghostbusters headquarters wasn't a set. It was a real firehouse in New York. Hook and Ladder 8 in Tribeca, its red doors and brick walls became a character of their own, anchoring the fantasy in something recognizably real. Fans never let it go. For decades, they've left marshmallows, flowers, proton pack props, and handwritten tributes at its doors. After September 11th, firefighters stationed there became local heroes, and the Ghostbusters symbol outside took on new meaning. The ghosts may be fiction, but the firehouse is forever, a pilgrimage site for believers. When Ghostbusters opened in June 1984, critics weren't impressed. Some called it uneven, others dismissed it as a noisy special effects cartoon with no heart. The studio braced for a flop. Audiences had other plans. Word of mouth exploded. Lines wrapped around theaters as people returned again and again. It had grossed nearly $300 million worldwide, the decade's highest-earning comedy. Kids wore proton packs for Halloween. "Who you gonna call?" became a playground chant. Critics doubted it, but audiences made it immortal, transforming skeptical reviews into cultural juggernaut status. Hollywood blockbusters usually take years. Ghostbusters had 12 months. Columbia handed Ivan Reitman $30 million with one condition. The movie had to be in theaters by June 1984. That left a single year to write, cast, shoot, edit, and finish every effect. Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, and Reitman locked themselves in a Martha's Vineyard house for 3 frantic weeks to hammer out the script. Then cameras rolled immediately, with Richard Edlund's brand new effect studio racing in parallel. Deadlines were brutal, nights blurred into mornings. But somehow the impossible schedule held. By summer '84, proton packs were firing on big screens, and what could have been a train wreck became comedy legend. Ghostbusters started as a bloated space epic nobody could afford. It nearly collapsed under lawsuits, studio doubts, and impossible deadlines, yet became the decade's highest-grossing comedy. From Slimer's tribute to Stay Puft's sweetness, it proved risky ideas could become pop culture cornerstones. The ghosts may fade, but this movie refuses to leave. If you enjoyed these behind-the-scenes secrets, check out our deep dive into another 80s classic that almost never happened.